There it is. Okay. So I see Boston. I see Berlin, New Hampshire. I see Idaho. Do we have we have a Washington? We're all over the place. So I'll jump back into there. But if you're joining us right now, please let us know where you are located, and we'll give you your rep. I'm gonna rep you out right here on the call. So while we get started, I'm going to do a very brief introduction to who I am and who we at NeuroMaker are, just in about 40 seconds or so. And then I'll talk a little bit more about what we're going to be covering here today. But just so you know who we are NeuroMaker. We're actually a part of BrainCo, which was incubated in the Harvard iLab about 7 years ago. We're one of the top 10 brain-machine interface companies in the world. By employee headcount, we actually might be the world's largest. We have about a little over 300 employees in offices all over the world, and our flagship office in the US is in Boston. And as you can tell from my glorious background, I'm working from home, so actually a lot of our staff has gone remote, which is a happy transition for us. We've been featured in publications by MIT and NASA. If any of you are looking to geek out over some cool stuff, you can take a look at the NASA Technology Transfer Program. That's where NASA shares some of its key technologies and showcase how NASA tech has been applied into different industries around the world. So actually a lot of what NASA astronauts do for neurofeedback training, so understanding their own brain and how to develop good habits from that information. We actually took on a piece of the tech that NASA developed, and NASA actually showcased that. So you can actually find us on the NASA website. In case you're interested, we did the same thing with the MIT Media Lab. We also have a lot of colleagues here from Boston. And we've been featured in ISTE. I'm sure everybody on here is somewhat familiar with EdTech. So if you happen to run across any ISTE stuff, there's a good chance that we'll show up on there somewhere. Now, who is this mystery man talking to you on Zoom? Well, my name is Andrew Bannish. I've been doing international STEM programs for about the past 11 years. So in a previous life, I managed, if anybody out there is a FIRST Robotics alumni, first of all, whoop whoop. And second of all, I managed that program in China for about 5 years. So everything from kindergartners all the way up through high schoolers, building everything from simple paper mache, like very basic, like Lego Duplo block models, all the way up into industrial robots. So really fun experience. Since then, I decided to do grad school while I could be a shameless, unemployed young man. And then since then, I've moved over to NeuroMaker, where we've really had this opportunity to work with unbelievably cool brain-computer interface technology, AI tools, all kinds of stuff, and really think about how we can apply these into education. And there's a whole lot of stuff we could cover there, but that won't be the focus for today's talk. But I'd be happy to cover that if you are interested. So I think we got one more. Oh, and we got another one up in California, so welcome. So on our agenda, we have 4 main points here that I'd like to share with everybody about the future of 21st century skills. I know this is a subject that comes up in a lot of educational documentation, like a lot of, like school, like new plans. If a new superintendent comes in, or there's like a district-wide, like 10-year plan or long-term plan, this typically comes up. So I thought what would be helpful in this session is it'd be very difficult to cover absolutely everything in the limited time that we have here. But what I would like to showcase are a couple things for you. So first is I would like to test your skills right away. So we're going to jump right into a personalized assessment that I will walk you through, where you can judge how ready you are for the 21st century workplace from one of the character traits that we look for. So I'm going to keep that a mystery until we get through it, and then I'll share you a bit more. But I think it'll be a fun way to kind of get a sense of where we're going today. So after we do that, I'm going to showcase to you all what some of the IECD and a few other big name educational actors out there in the world have defined as 21st century skills. So we'll break those down a little bit so we can see what that really means. So we can see that from a much bigger perspective. And then I'm going to talk about how we've taken some of these concepts into play for the students that we work with. So we look at these standards very highly, and you'll see them peppered into a lot of our experiences and things that we do. So we'll walk you through that. And then finally, I will task you all with, we'll see if we have the time to do this. I'm really trying to put you all up to the challenge here, where I'm going to showcase to you all a project that a group of students that we work with put together. And I would like you to rate the 21st century skills that you see exhibited through that project. So I thought that'd be a fun way to wrap this up. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. As I mentioned before, for anybody just joining us, this is meant to be super casual. If you have any comments in the chat group that you want to drop in, or if you have anything else that you want to add, go for it. We're just here to have fun. And one last thing before we get started too is if you've joined us for some of our previous calls, I've made these very lecture-based and kind of rote education-based. I would like to try something a lot more interactive today. So let's go ahead and get started. So here we go. Let me move to the next slide. So cold opener mystery quiz time. So this is a fun group of words that I just put together to really get you all ready for the quiz that we're going to do here today. So what I would like you to all do right now is either find a piece of paper or open up a Word document on your computer, or just something that you can record some numbers on. I'm going to ask you a series of 10 questions. I believe it's 10 questions. And for each question, you're going to have to rate how much you feel about that statement on a scale from 1 to 5. So I'm going to do it with you. So go ahead, take a quick 10 seconds, go grab a piece of paper and a pen or whatever else that you want to use to record this data. It might be good for you to also use an Excel sheet. Go ahead and have that. So I'm going to give you, you know what, I'm going to be a nice guy. I'm going to give you 15 seconds here. Let me open up my stopwatch and ready, go. So here's the clock. Let's see, 2 seconds have gone by. Go get that paper, get that pen. Get something to record your answers down. So we're at 10 seconds, 5 more seconds. I'm going to begin. Clock's ticking, clock's ticking, clock's ticking. All right, cool. I just saw we got a little message here. All right, so some people are ready. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And just like I said, I'm giving this with no context. You don't know why you're doing this just yet, but I will tell you at the very end. Let's just get through it first and be very objective. So here we go. Number 1. So new ideas and projects sometimes distract me from new ones. So what I would like to do on your piece of paper is write down a number from 1 to 5, whichever one you believe is most connected to your experience. So if you think this statement is not at all like you, I'd like you to type in 5 or record a 5. If it is very much like you, I would like you to say a 1. So once again, this is meant to be very subjective. You are going to have to judge this yourself. There's no objective rubric we're using for this just yet. I just want you to use your own personal understanding of how you interpret this and write down a number that you believe best corresponds with what you're going to do. So I am going to write mine down too, and I'm going to think about it for 1 second because I want to make sure that I get a score that I agree with. So I'm going to tell you my answer at the end. You're not going to know my secret answer. All right, so that's our first question. All right, so I'm going to move on in just a second. So once again, please write down the number for whichever statement you most agree with from this prompt. So new ideas and projects sometimes distract me from new ones. Is this not at all like you, or is this very much like you? Okay, so we got our first one written down. Next, setbacks don't discourage me. I don't give up easily. Once again, on a scale from 1 to 5. So you'll notice that the 1 to 5 scale is going to reverse every here and there. So please pay attention to what the prompt says. So I'm going to read it again. Setbacks don't discourage me. I don't give up easily. If this is not at all like you, I'd like you to record a 1. If this is very much like you, I'd like you to write a 5. And then of course we have some stuff in the middle there in case you don't believe that you attribute yourself to either of those extremes. So I'm going to write mine down. Okay. Setbacks don't discourage me. I don't give up easily. Okay, I'm going to move ahead in a couple seconds here. And next question. I often start a goal, but later choose to pursue a different one. So once again, so notice the numbers reversed again. So please pay close attention to what statement you are writing down. So is this not at all like you, or is this very much like you? And just once again, this is subjective. Just pick whichever one you think is the most appropriate from your understanding. Okay, great. All right, next one. I am a hard worker. So once again, our numbers are reversed. Number 1, not at all like me, or number 5, very much like me. So write down one number which you think encapsulates your thoughts. So only pick one of these, please. Okay, I'll move on to the next one. If you were moving too fast for anybody, please let me know, drop down in the comments, and I'll make sure that you can get up to speed. Next one, this is a little bit longer. I have difficulty maintaining my focus on projects that take more than a few months to complete. So 5, not at all like me, or 1, very much like me. Or choose whatever you wish in the middle. So remember, write down one number. Which one number correlates with that statement and your understanding? Okay. Next one. Oh, by the way, if anybody knows what quiz this is, feel free to drop it in the comments. I'm curious if anybody has encountered this before. All right, so next one. I finish whatever I begin. I finish whatever I begin. So remember, we have our scale. So in this case, 1 is not at all like me. 5, very much like me. So which one do you believe best describes you? I finish whatever I begin. All right, moving ahead here in just a moment. Look at this, you barely get on here and I'm already asking all these questions. All right, here we go, next one. My interests change from year to year. So 5, not at all like me, or 1, very much like me. Or anything else in between. Write down one number, please. Write down one number. My interests change from year to year. Okay, I just wrote down my answer. All right, next one. I am diligent. I never give up. So once again, keep in mind the scale. So this is going to reverse every here and there. 1 in this case is not at all like me. 5, very much like me. Whichever one of these you agree with, please write down that number. Okay. Next question. I have been obsessed with a certain idea or project for a long time, but later lost interest. I'm going to read that one more time. I have been obsessed with a certain idea or project for a long time, but later lost interest. So in this case, 5 is not at all like me. 1, very much like me. So whichever one you agree with, or whatever's in between. And once again, this is all very subjective. So whatever you feel is the most appropriate. And don't be too hard on yourself. Next one. I have overcome setbacks to conquer an important challenge. 1, not at all like me. 5, very much like me. I have overcome setbacks to conquer an important challenge. And remember, all of these things are relative. So what somebody else might think of as an important challenge might be different than what you think. But once again, this is meant to be very subjective. It's based on your own understanding, what you think. We only have a handful of these more. I think we're getting close to the end in case anybody's getting a little, oh, and that is the end, perfect. Okay, so now a little bit of math. So all you need to do is add up all of your numbers and divide them by 10. So what I would like everyone to do, add up all of those numbers, and then I would like you to divide it by 10, and feel free to drop it in the comments. I'm going to tell you what this means in just a moment. Just get your score. And I'm going to do mine on a calculator because I'm very lazy. And I would hate to disappoint you with an incorrect number, and I don't trust my 3rd grade brain. No offense to 3rd graders. That's really, they do not deserve to be lumped in with me. All right. I'm seeing the chat blow up. I've got my number here. I'm going to keep it a secret until I hear more of yours. So I'm going to read out some of these that are coming in here. That's okay. So I see if you're coming in later, that's no problem at all. We will have a recording of this if you want to go through it. I will also tell you where you can find this quiz and what it means on the next slide, but it's we got to make this fun. I don't want to give you all the answers right away. All right, so I see a 4, I see a 4, I see a 2.5, I see a 3.2, a 3.7. So I'm going to give everybody a couple more seconds. Once again, this is completely subjective. This is not being administered by a psychologist. So this is really more just for some practical experience here. Don't feel like this has to be the absolute end of the line for whatever this means. All right, so I'm going to give a couple more seconds here. And I will share my number, and then we're going to learn what that means. Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to jump right into it. Oh, and now we got a 4. A lot of 4s here. All right, here we go. So what did I make you do? Why is this important? And what better things could you do with the time? You could be petting your cat right now. You could be having a cup of coffee, maybe pouring yourself a martini because you deserve it. Well, instead of doing all those things, what we just did was, ooh, I'm not even going to tell you yet. I forgot I had this extra slide. So the next thing I would like you to do is, you still don't know exactly what this is yet, but that's okay. I would like you to look at what we're going to call our grit score. And what that means, I'm going to tell you in the next slide, because I have to make this very torturous for you all. Please go ahead and take a look at your grit score. And what I would like you to do, I realize it's not going to match up precisely with whatever your number is, but I would like you to please write down the closest percentile to your score. So I got a 4.2, and I am going to say that's about a 75%. So you can just kind of eyeball it. So next thing I'd like you to do is take a look at your score, find whatever the closest percentile is, and write that in the chat, please. So once again, I got a 4.2 score, which puts me right about here. And I'm going to call that a rough 75%. So that might not be exactly accurate, but we're just getting a feel for things right here. All right, so I'm seeing, let's see here, we got some 60%, got a 65. What else we got? I see, oh wow, an 83, that is very specific. Got a 70, 65, 30%, 45%. Cool, so there's a whole lot of, and keep writing them in there. I'm gonna move ahead because I've given you enough anticipation here. So what is all of this? This is called the grit index, the grit index. Also, write down in the comments while I start to explain this. Have you ever heard of this before? Or is it something that you're familiar with? Simple yes or no will suffice unless you want to add more there. So this, see some yeses and some nos, great. So this is, if you're looking for some reading for yourself, this is actually a really fun book. And what's actually been really fun from my side is this came out, I want to say about 6-7 years ago or so, by Dr. Angela Duckworth from the University of Pennsylvania. And she did research into successful people across the world. I think she started off working with people who were going to West Point. And then she worked at the Air Force Academy. She worked with top level corporations. You can find more information online. And what she really found was one of the key characteristics of successful people are those that show this certain trait called grit. And like we like to see that as persistence or staying strong and courageous. I think, like from a psychological point of view, these are really people who commit to certain goals. They realize that they're going to run into different roadblocks along the way, and that there's not going to be an easy answer to every question. But the commitment from whatever source of personal inspiration that they can find will drive them through the different kinds of challenges that they're going to create. So what I wanted to do through this exercise is we just focused into one small piece of 21st century skills. And I think this will be a great mechanism for us to then investigate everything as a whole. Because I think one of the issues that I find when we're trying to implement a 21st century learning solution, or it's working with students in the classroom on displaying these skills or assessing them, which inevitably we typically have to do. It can start off very nebulous if you're looking at just a big sheet that says, oh, here's the skills that we want to cover. These are important. I think really getting into the nuts and bolts of one of these things and working backwards can give us some extra perspective in the things that we want to do. So once again, we just looked at one small piece. So this actually is one of the 21st century skills that has been identified from everything from the OECD to the number of the Harvard Graduate School of Education, a lot of the different rubrics that somebody would use for 21st century skills have this included. And what's interesting is that they actually use this specific terminology. They specifically say grit. And I got to tip my hat to Dr. Duckworth here because she really created a movement around something that I think many people knew was important, but never quite formulated. So now that we have a bit more information on what one of these things is, let's take a look at the bigger picture. So 21st century skills, these things get thrown out there. What is very nice on our side is that this has been a hot button topic for the last 20, 30 years, especially since we're already in the 21st century. And a lot of these things that we've decided to be important have been characterized into a few different groups. And these have been through numerous studies. So actually one of my old professors, Dr. Chris Deedy, did a ton of research into this kind of learning and like how do we implement this across schools. And you can really form these into three different buckets. So the first one are these foundational literacies that we want to get people to learn. Number two are the competencies. So these essential multifaceted skill sets that we want students to be able to display when they are working through separate problems. And then number three is character qualities. So what are the things that a student is going to individually have to be ready for in order to take on whatever challenge or whatever workplace needs that they're going to encounter in the future. And I'm going to make one last book recommendation while this comes up. There's another wonderful book. I realize that my screen is a little blurry here, but whatever your political inclinations are, Thomas Friedman wrote a wonderful book called Thank You for Being Late. And this additional book goes into great detail on taking some of these specific literacies, competencies, and character qualities, and then wrapping those into like what the future of work actually looks like and the skill sets that students today need to demonstrate. So what you can see here is one of the character qualities that we just dove into. So we looked at persistence and grit. As you can see, big shout out to Dr. Duckworth. What used to be called persistence is now more and more being called grit, thanks to a lot of her good work and research. So this is just one small piece of the puzzle. So when we're out there trying to develop projects and curricula and materials for students to use, these are some of the frameworks that we use in order to make these things successful. And I hope that these are things that can be of worthwhile to your students as well. And actually in our last webinar, we covered pathways programs. And one of the biggest things that we look for in pathways programs is this big word here at the bottom. So lifelong learning. So through these 21st century skills that people are developing, like as you can see here, and one of the questions I'm going to ask here at the end is the things that are happening in school that are not demonstrated here. I think that really speaks volumes to the new systems that we want to put in place in order to make these things work. So, you know, at the end of the day, particularly in the STEM world and trying to give people their first steps into their career, we want to make sure that they are ready from a character point of view, from a literacy point of view, and a competency point of view to further their career into an unknown future. Things are obviously not as linear as they used to be, and we have to get students ready for a workplace that's going to be very dynamic. So let's just take a quick moment to just develop some common terminology around these things if you're not familiar with it. So in this 21st century skills matrix, foundational literacies is what I like to call like what happens primarily from the classroom. So being able to learn these things that really take time and effort to develop a common understanding of. So things like literacy. I'm not going to spend too much time on here because I know that this is something that you're all probably quite familiar with. Like we obviously all have to be able to communicate well within the language systems that we use. Students are going to have basic skills with math and numeracy. So it's going to be very difficult to quantify anything unless you have a good understanding of what these concepts are. And then not to mention everything else here from financial to information technology, scientific literacy, and cultural and civic literacy. So what are the essential skills within this frameworks that we want students to have so that they can then make bigger discoveries and understandings through that. So that's really what we're talking about with our literacies. Next, we have our competencies. So these are the things that we like to really hone in on in our project-based learning systems. So it is possible for a student to, sit at a desk by him or herself, or go online and learn those certain literacy skills. Like, albeit a lot of these things are better with other people, but learning basic math, basic literacy is possible to have a much more self-directed approach. However, a lot of these competencies are things that these are the abilities that students are going to have, particularly when it comes to uh, achieving some sort of defined goal or some kind of defined objective. So there's going to be critical thinking and problem solving that go along the way, creativity. I'm not going to spend too much time on each one of these, communication and collaboration. So when we're designing our project-based learning activities, imagine the same things happening in your classrooms. These are the skill sets that we are looking, or the abilities rather, that we're looking to have our students demonstrate, so that we know that the frameworks that they're using to solve a problem are being done through kind of codified lenses. So this is something that we spend a lot of time, and a lot of, like ISTE digital literacy skills, standards, a lot of those competencies are measured by the standards that a lot of other organizations have taken on. Finally, character qualities. These are the kind of skills, or the abilities rather, that are demonstrated after, like, these are like really longitudinal skill sets. So these are qualities that students can only develop by their personal experiences, interacting with those competencies and literacy skills day in and day out. So these are things that often, maybe you've all taken a course on one of these things in school, and these are things that are very difficult to be taught. They have to be experienced, they have to be nurtured, they have to be given opportunities to succeed and to fail. That's the only way that a lot of these character qualities come into the foray. So when we are looking at this stuff day in and day out, what we typically like to do is like look at our whole learning systems, and imagine you do this in the classroom too. Look at the bigger picture of things. If you were to look at the full progression of whether it's a year at school or it's like a full secondary school curricula, and all the experiences that a student's going to progress along the way, what are the ways that we can really ensure that these kind of qualities are being nurtured, so that people can develop these things and become much more self-aware of these qualities. And of course, you will see something familiar on here. As we mentioned before, grit is one of those metrics that we like to use in this kind of a setting. And as you can see, there's been some amazing research done to this subject from Dr. Duckworth and others that allow us to build some common frameworks and some ways of kind of making sure that we know like what works and what doesn't. So in this case, so these are all things that we look very heavily towards when we develop our materials. And I'm sure these are things that come up in your classroom as well. So now we have somewhat of a common understanding of what these things are. I realize that many of you probably have already encountered these in some form or other. So what I would like to do is now, once again, I want this to be as interactive as possible. I feel like everybody who's joined us for our webinars over the past few months has heard me talk enough. I do not want to torture you anymore with that than you need to. So what I would like to do now is kind of have us take a look at this into practice. So it's one thing to say that we want to nurture these skills, it's a whole other thing to build systems and personnel around these common values. So what I would like to do is, this is not meant to be totally showing ourselves off. However, we don't, we certainly find every opportunity we can to do that. There will be some brash product placement here, so please forgive me if this is something that you might like notice. We live and breathe this stuff, so this is the stuff that comes immediately to mind. So what I would like to do is open up our NeuroMaker Creative Challenge, which is our capstone project that we use as a mechanism to measure all of these 21st century learning skills, along with a host of other things. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open up this link. I'm going to share it with everybody. And what I'm going to hone in on the rubric that we use to judge all the projects that come in. If you don't know, the NeuroMaker Challenge is a way, sorry about that, I'm going ahead of myself. This challenge is a way for students to use the materials that they learn through our systems and develop their own real world projects. So that, like you can see here, we have students that use our technology and they build something creative and impactful in the world of assistive technology that our engineers will actually review. And you might be asking, well, this looks really cool. And you have like these wonderful people up here, one of these faces look very familiar, who are rating these things. So what kind of, like, clearly we have to use some kind of objective frameworks that allow people to get their fair say into what we do. So I'm going to open up the hood, and this is publicly accessible anyway, but I think it does get buried within a bunch of our information. I'm going to show you the actual rubric that we used. And what I would like to challenge the group with is just take a look at what we have centered here. And what I would like you to do is identify whatever 21st century skills that we mentioned before. So some of these are going to be not as obvious, some will be more obvious, but I would like you to write in a few things that you notice here. So this, just as a side note, this rubric was developed in tandem with representatives from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. We worked with a few different biomedical engineering companies to see what kind of things that they would look for in real world assistive technology. So there is some institutional backing behind this. So anyway, I'm going to stop for just a moment and just kind of let my screen sit here. What I'd like you to please, and I'll open up the 21st century skills thing in a moment again, but please drop in the comments whatever 21st century skills that you see within one of these criteria or descriptions. And while you are doing that, I'm going to share a couple of other comments. So thank you, Amy. I can see that I'm just going to read this comment aloud. So these are the qualities that I think give my special education students an edge in some cases. They have to work hard to learn and earn things, so facing adversity and struggles are not new to them in the real world. So I think that's a perfect transition to some of the things that we're talking about here too. So what we like to do for our capstone project is to challenge students to start thinking like real world engineers and even just people entering their real world from a base point of view so that they can get ready for these things. So once again, drop in the chat whatever of these 21st century skills that you see. So I'm going to stop here for a second just so you can refresh yourself with these. Remember, we have our foundational literacies, we have our competencies, and our character qualities. So what are some of the things that you see in this rubric? I'm going to give you about, I'll give you about 30 or 40 seconds just to drop whatever thoughts you have on the comments. In the meantime, I'm going to write a couple of these too. Give it about 20 more seconds. We're starting to see a few comments come in. All right, cool. So I'm going to, so if you're still thinking of a few things, feel free to drop them in here. I'm more than happy to share those with the group. But here we are in our virtual classroom starting to look at these things together. So I'll just share a few of these that have come in. So of course, technical literacy, that is absolutely one of them that comes in here. I realize that I'm throwing this all at you without a whole lot of context. You haven't seen too much of what we've done with the Creative Challenge and things like that. However, I will share a project with you next where we can start to look at this. But I did want to at least kind of see how some of these skills can come out of the woodwork from some of these things that happen in the classroom. So, you know, in this case, just going to share a couple of these that I see on the chat group. So I see practical value, test and result, technological literacy, critical thinking. I see collaboration, creativity. Ooh, and I actually wrote down grit. I think you'll see that here too. So I'm just going to take a look at this one more time and then kind of go back and forth. So yeah, so once again, we saw all of these things put together, right? So we want to see all of these skills and that these are put onto a rubric that we just saw for the submissions that come in. But then also, you know, like you've rightly said in here, there's clearly technological literacy in here. As we saw in here, I think somebody mentioned literacy. However, like don't forget, there's a lot of these other things that come in there too. Scientific literacy, so being able to think through things scientifically, not just in terms of biology and chemistry, but the whole scientific process. So that cause and result kind of testing procedure, developing a hypothesis. We do a lot with this in engineering as well. So following the engineering design process, and a lot of these things will dovetail quite well into our foundational literacies. Competencies, we covered all of those. So good job, everybody. I think we found all of those as well. And then these character qualities, these also come through too. I think some of these come through a little bit less directly than the rubric might insist on. However, you will see some things in here, like this one, like outright says creativity. It's looking for original and unique things. You know, we're looking for like even a student producing a project for us does mean quite a bit of grit. Like we've seen students that work on these projects for nearly an entire semester. So really focusing all your time, effort, and energies on building something like over the course of a long time is something that we look for and comes through quite often through the submissions that we get. So just wanted to say yes. So I'm glad that we can see a lot of those things through here. And now where I would like to direct our attention towards for the last piece of this is actually seeing this in action. So we have about 20 minutes left here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play for you a video of, it's only about 4 minutes long, of one of the student submissions that came through in this project. And once again, what I would like you all to think about are, what are the skills that you see demonstrated, whether it's through this rubric or through these 21st century skills that connect with what the students made. And I'm going to be very blunt again and say that the sound may not come through this presentation. So what I'm also going to do is I am going to give you the direct link, and you get to see some ads here because we live in this day and age. So I am going to copy this link. I'm going to give it to everybody. So that is the link to what I'm going to show you. I'm just going to play it here. But what I ask, if you can't hear the sound, then please watch it on your own device. And then what I would like to do is just let you all watch it, think about those skills that we talked about, and then I'd like you to once again write in the comments with, you know, what skills that you saw that you saw through this project. What are things that maybe were lacking or you didn't see, and then we'll share some thoughts there. And I'd love to answer any questions that you have or cover any next steps. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. But once again, if the sound does not come through, please feel free to watch that video on your device. So here we go.
Also a rising senior at River Hill High School. Today we will be presenting a detailed proposal of our NeuroMaker BCI solution.
Despite the transformative nature of assistive technology, to this day, driving remains an issue for those with attentive disorders such as ADHD.
Adults with ADHD are 1.81 times more likely to get involved in a car crash. What's worse, this problem is further exacerbated with adolescent drivers. As seen in the following graphs, drivers with ADHD are more likely to commit moving violations and get into car crashes in their initial months after licensure.
To refocus distracted drivers back onto the road, we, Team River Hill, applied concepts of haptic neuroplasticity and their relation to attentiveness to build a solution to improve the lives of drivers with ADHD using the NeuroMaker BCI.
NeuroMaker BCI records raw EEG waves and filters out noise and other discrepancies to produce an attention index. This index is able to evaluate how much attention the user is paying at a given time.
Through extensive research, we also found that haptic feedback, a form of vibration-based sensory stimulation, is often linked with neuroplasticity and neurological training and development. In a 2020 study by Ritter and her colleagues, it stated that improving attention and engagement in populations suffering from TBI through haptic force feedback showed statistically significant improvement compared to those without haptic feedback.
Using these findings, our team set out to create an assistive technology capable of refocusing ADHD drivers back onto the road through haptic feedback. First, we designed a series of experiments to figure out the ranges pertinent to focused and unfocused driving. As with any experimental design, hypotheses, sample size, randomization, replication, and proper methodology was established and taken into account to yield acceptable data.
To start off, we gathered a group of 10 adults from ages 18 to 22. Then we randomly assigned these adults either of two treatments, focused or unfocused driving, through drawing lots out of a hat, with each treatment group having 5 adults allocated to them. For unfocused driving, it was achieved through having a subject multitask. While driving, the said subject would be engaging in a conversation, attempting to write on a sticky note, or interacting with their phone, which would affect their attention and productivity. Afterwards, we had the adults drive up and down a neighborhood while we measured their raw EEG waves.
As stated before, the NeuroMaker BCI is capable of recording raw EEG waves and filtering out noise and other discrepancies to produce an attention index. Hence, through recording their raw EEG waves, we were able to determine what values on an attention index correlated to focused and unfocused driving respectively. We then repeated this process an additional 2 times for the sake of replication. After analyzing our results, we found that on average, any value below 45 on the attention index could be considered distracted or unfocused driving.
Next, we employed a Raspberry Pi as our medium because it provided a simple interface in which we could import and process the BCI data in order to determine whether the driver was distracted or unfocused.
By default, the data gathered by the NeuroMaker BCI is stored in an Excel spreadsheet. Using the pandas package, we are able to extract the data and reassign it into a Python data frame. From here, the code intermittently verifies that the driver has remained above the aforementioned 45 attention range. If this condition is not met for more than 5 seconds, a signal is sent to the GPIO pins that activate a small vibrational motor that provides haptic feedback to the user.
We will now conduct a short demonstration of our product in action. The impaired driver will get in the car, wear the BCI, then begin to drive. If the driver's attention wavers for an extended period of time, as seen in the video, the driver will be given haptic feedback. Although we used a small LED light in the video to make the scene easier to visualize, in reality, our solution uses a small haptic motor to refocus the driver back onto the road.
Though this product, in theory, will be able to improve functional capabilities of drivers with ADHD, there are still some limitations that need to be addressed. For example, the thresholds for the attention index may need to be adjusted for each individual, and our tests may have been flawed since we do not have access to willing ADHD participants. Furthermore, we are unable to currently gather live data, which creates a significant delay between the user and the signal. Lastly, the system isn't space effective. Further simplification is required.
In the future, we hope to fine-tune our product through additional testing and potentially modifying the software of the BCI in order to make the product more accurate. We also plan to further simplify the solution to warrant further visibility in terms of accessibility and cost.
If made into a publicly available and viable product, hypothetically, this solution would be able to refocus nearly 600,000 ADHD drivers back onto the road and significantly reduce the risk of moving violations and car crashes. If our solution is broadened to all of the driving population, then nearly 10 to 15% of car crashes could be avoided, saving nearly $80 billion annually.
Throughout this competition, we learned how the NeuroMaker BCI could be used and manipulated to help people with disabilities. Aside from optimizing daily tasks for people with attentive disorders, we believe similar concepts can be applied in alternative scenarios as well. For example, in one of our initial brainstorms, we proposed the NeuroMaker BCI could be used to help people with physical disabilities in simple daily tasks, like turning on a light switch.
We hope you all enjoyed our presentation. Thank you for your time.
Wow, look at this. 94% of people believe company culture is important to.
All right, we don't need to hear about company culture. Okay, so I thought that was really cool. I think that's a great example of a lot of the stuff that we try to do here. So before I go any farther, how about if anybody has, I kept a running list of some of the things that I saw here, and it's not exhaustive at all, but if anybody wants to write in the chat, what kind of 21st century skills did you see from those group of students? So I'm going to go back to our rubric here. So once again, we're looking at everything from character qualities to competencies to foundational literacies. Not to mention there's a group of kids who are, by the way, this is a group of high schoolers based out of Maryland who took this stuff on all by themselves. They actually found us through a Google search, I think, and said, hey, this thing's amazing. We want to really get our hands dirty with this stuff and play around with it. So this is possible without even the direction of, educators and stuff in the classroom. We hope that people can really take on that initiative on their own. So I'll give you a couple minutes or a couple seconds rather to kind of write down your thoughts here. I'll share a few of mine while yours are coming in. I saw Clearly, we saw a lot of grit there. They worked through different prototypes and went through a lot of different design choices that they didn't give up on, and pivoted when they needed to. Obviously, there was collaboration there. People were working together to work on their final project. There was everything from scientific literacy. If you all saw that they put together a proper experiment with like randomized pieces to it, collected their data appropriately. Numeracy, right? Like they're working with these different data forms that are like taking on different like math properties. Literacy, so they went through, I even see a comment in here too that's mentioning this. They're working through research papers. They did a bunch of research on problem statements in this area. So those are, and there's plenty more that I saw in here too, but just to see what's coming in with the group. So I completely agree with these. We see creativity and innovation, social and cultural awareness. Yep. So people are empathizing with a human group that is not similar to their own condition, which is something that is super important for people moving out there into the world. Problem statements, data provided, collaboration, problem solving. So what I hope we can all kind of gather from this, I realize that like every school and every program is going to take this on in their own specific way, but at the end of the day, we're all looking to find ways where we can engage students and future learners into these kind of 21st century skills frameworks. So when they end up out there in the career, in their career stage, they're going to be able to work with these different kinds of challenges that come their way. Even speaking from my own experience, I feel like, you know, I very much am envious some ways of my parents who could follow a much more linear career path. But I think that, you know, in this day and age, people are going to be taking on all kinds of different challenges, learning new skills when they have to. The world moves very fast, and as Tom Friedman once said, you have to run in place just to stand still these days. And I think having these skills in your back pocket to take on those challenges is really important. All right, so we are right towards the end here. I appreciate everybody's thoughts. So what I'm going to do is I am going to open up for any questions that you might have. If you have any questions or any additional comments, feel free to write it in here. If you can't quite think of anything yet, what I'd like you to reflect on are these two statements. So some last thoughts. So what skills are not exhibited here that we see in education currently? Are there things being taught? Are there skills that are emphasized in the school system now that do not fall within this framework? Which I think is something important. And then one of my personal favorite statements, this is also what one of my former professors used to talk about all the time, putting forth any sort of new educational frameworks or conducting any new kinds of learnings means that we typically have to unlearn something, right? So if we found that there is a better way to do something, right? Like we clearly don't teach, you know, we're not teaching like how to use a feather pen anymore, like maybe we did in the 1700s. A lot of times school systems, educators, students, they actually have to spend some time unlearning like what were previously accepted means of whatever way they wanted to solve the problem. So these are two of the things. So even if you don't have any current thoughts on this at the moment, I would like you to reflect on these things. I think these are like two ways that we can kind of look at where the education system sits now, as opposed to kind of some of the frameworks that we're hoping to build up in the future. If you look at a lot of the UN publications, if you look at like, even if you look at even your state, whatever state you're in, I heard all the people repping their different locales earlier in the call. Even if you look at their like future education or workforce training plans, you are going to see this 21st century learning skills brought up time and time again. I think that we are in an era now where a lot of these concepts have been taken from like where they started off towards the turn of the century and are now in some really research-backed codified frameworks. So I hope this is one way that you could share with all that. So with all that being said, I really appreciate you all taking the time to interact a little bit with us. I hope that you found this very engaging and informative. We try to share as much of what we learned here as possible with our community. And if there's anything else out there that we can shed further light on or would benefit you and your community through some of the talent and the skills that we have here, we'd be more than happy to organize something that can meet your needs. So with that, if anybody has any additional thoughts or comments that they want to leave, go ahead and do it. Otherwise, I'll give everybody another minute or two, and feel free to go about your day, and I hope everything works out well for you. So once again, thanks for joining us here for learning a bit about 21st century skills with me, Andrew, and I hope to see you again soon in the future. I'll give you just another minute. All right, great. Looks like we're good here. So, okay, everyone, once again, thank you for joining us. There will be a recording that's available on our NeuroMaker STEM YouTube channel. We'll be sending out follow-up emails to people who are interested in any of the content here, and feel free to be connected with us. We'd be more than happy to work with you on achieving this new kind of educational future. So with that, I will leave you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and end this call, and I hope you have a wonderful day.